The great station called Harmony's Edge hung in space like a metal city. Ships from 100 different worlds floated around it, their lights blinking in the darkness. Inside the station's main hall, creatures of every shape and size filled. The seats. Some had fur, others had scales, and a few looked like walking trees. They all had one thing in common, though. They were scared. Commander Zefkara stood at the center of the hall. Her blue skin seemed to glow under the bright lights, and her 4 arms moved as she spoke. The other beings in the room watched her with wide eyes. Some whispered to each other in languages that sounded like music, while others made clicking noises with their mouths. "We have lost 12 star systems in 3 weeks, Zefkara said, her voice carrying across the silent hall. The Void Devourers are awake, and they are hungry. They eat everything in their path, planets, stars, even space itself. A creature that looked like a giant insect raised one of its many legs. What about our weapons? Our ships have the best technology in the galaxy." Zefkara shook her head. "We tried everything. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, even the mind killers that worked on the Shadow Fleet. Nothing stops them. They just keep coming." Near the back of the hall, Captain Jake Morrison sat quietly. He was the only human in the room, and he stuck out like a sore thumb. Where the other beings had colorful skin or strange features, Jake looked plain and ordinary. His brown hair was cut short, and his uniform was simple blue cloth. But his eyes were sharp, and he listened to every word. Next to Jake sat Dr. Lisa Carter. She was a scientist who studied alien life forms. Her red hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she held a small computer in her hands. She had been taking notes during the meeting, but now she looked worried. "The Devourers," Lisa whispered to Jake. "I've been reading about them in the old records. They're not just monsters. They're something much worse." Jake nodded, but kept his eyes on the speaker. Around them, the alien beings were getting more upset. Some were standing up and waving their arms, tentacles, or whatever they had. Others were making loud noises that might have been crying. A tall, thin creature with silver skin stood up. "What about the ethereal collective? They have powers of the mind. Surely they can stop these things?" Elder Mordun was the oldest being. In the room, he looked like a ghost made of light, and when he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We tried," he said sadly. "Our strongest mind warriors attacked the Devourers, but something terrible happened. The more we used our powers, the stronger the Devourers became. It was like they were feeding on our fear." The room became even quieter. Lisa looked down at her computer and started typing quickly. She pulled up star maps and battle reports, studying them with growing excitement. "Jake," she whispered, "look." At this, she showed him her screen. It displayed a map of the galaxy with red dots marking where the Devourers had attacked. But there were also green dots showing safe areas, places the monsters had avoided. "Do you see the pattern?" Lisa asked. Jake looked closer. The green dots were all in one part of the galaxy, the outer rim where human colonies were built. The Devourers had come close to these areas, but always turned away at the last moment. "They're avoiding human space," Jake said quietly. Lisa nodded. "Every single time. They'll attack a system right next to a human colony, but they won't touch the humans themselves." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard stories about why humans lived so far from the center of the galaxy. The other species had pushed them out there, claiming humans were too dangerous to live among civilized beings. In the center of the hall, the arguing was getting louder. Some creatures wanted to abandon their worlds and run to the far edges of the galaxy. Others wanted to fight, even though they knew they would lose. "We need a miracle," someone shouted. "The gods have abandoned us," cried another. Elder Mordoon raised his hand, and the room fell silent. His ghostly form seemed to grow brighter as he spoke. "There is one option we have not discussed. One species that might be able to help us." The room became so quiet that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. He had a feeling he knew what was coming next. "The humans," Mordon said. The reaction was immediate. Half the room erupted in angry shouts, while the other half sat in stunned silence. Some creatures actually backed away from Jake and Lisa, as if they were dangerous just by being there. "You cannot be serious," hissed a snake-like being. "The humans are monsters. They are the reason we built the outer rim barriers. They fight like demons," added another. "They never surrender, never retreat. They would rather die than admit defeat." "Exactly," said Mordon. "That is why we need them." Commander Zeeth-Kara looked around the room. Her blue face was pale, and her hands were shaking. "The Elder speaks truth. We have all heard the stories. The Proxima incident, where one human ship held off an entire pirate fleet. The defense of New Montana, where human farmers fought off a Hive Queen invasion using only mining tools. They are not like us," whispered a tree-like creature. "They do not fear death the way we do. They do not run from impossible odds." Jake stood up slowly. Every eye in the room turned to him. He could feel their fear, their desperate hope, and their disgust all mixed together. "If you want our help," Jake said in a calm voice, "you'll have to ask properly. Humans don't respond well to being called monsters, even if that's what you think we are." Lisa stood up beside him. "The data doesn't lie. For some reason, the Devourers avoid human space. Maybe it's because they can sense something different about us." "Different how?" asked Zeeth-Kara. Lisa looked at Jake, then back at the crowd. "Maybe because we're the one species that doesn't run from the dark. We're the ones who look at the monster under the bed and decide to crawl down there with it." The room fell silent again. Jake could see the fear in their eyes, but also something else, hope. "I'll send a message to Earth Command," Jake said, "but I can't promise they'll come. Humans have long memories, and we remember how we were treated." "What would it take?" asked more single quotes done. Jake thought for a moment. "An official request from the Galactic Council, and an apology for the way humans have been treated for the past 50 years. "And if they refuse?" asked Zeeth-Kara. Jake looked around the room at all the scared faces. "Then you'll find out why even the gods learn to fear us. Because we're the species that shows up anyway, even when nobody wants us there." The meeting ended with more arguing, but Jake knew the decision had already been made. The galaxy was out of options and out of time. Soon they would learn what humans could do when the stakes were universal. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the human warship called Retribution. The ship was huge, bigger than most space stations, and it was painted black with white letters spelling out its name. Kate had been in the military for 20 years, and she had never seen anything like the message that had just arrived. The message came from Earth Command, from Fleet Admiral Ryan Torres himself. Kate read it 3 times before she believed it. The Galactic Council was asking for help. Not just any help. They wanted human military forces to save them from something called the Void Devourers. "Ma'am," said Lieutenant Commander Alex Hayes, walking up to Kate with a tablet in his hands. "I've pulled up all the files on the Galactic Council's request. You're going to want to see this." Kate took the tablet and scrolled through the information. The pictures showed destroyed planets, empty space where star systems used to be, and alien ships running away from something that looked like living darkness. "How bad is it?" Kate asked. "Bad," Alex replied. "They've lost 12 systems in 3 weeks. Their best weapons don't work. Their psychic powers make the problem worse. And according to our spy satellites, the Devourers are heading for the galactic core." Kate handed the tablet back to Alex. What about casualties? Billions dead, ma'am. Entire species wiped out. The Caltheran Empire is gone. The Nexus Federation is down to 3 planets. The only reason the Galactic Council still exists is because they keep moving their meeting place. Kate walked over to the big window that looked out into space. She could see other human ships floating nearby, destroyers, cruisers, and fighter carriers. The human fleet was small compared to the alien forces, but every ship was built for war. Alex, call a meeting of all senior officers. Conference room 1, 15 minutes. Yes, ma'am. Kate made her way to the conference room, thinking about the situation. For 50 years, the galactic community had treated humans like dangerous animals. They had pushed human colonies to the outer rim of the galaxy, far from civilized space. They had trade agreements with humans, but they always kept their distance. The conference room was full when Kate arrived. Around the table sat the best officers in the human fleet. There was Captain Ben Taylor from the destroyer Vigilant, Commander, Sarah Adams from the cruiser Defiance, and Colonel Dan Mitchell, who led the fighter squadrons. You've all read the reports, Kate began. The Galactic Council wants our help. They're facing something they can't handle, and they're desperate enough to ask the monsters for assistance. Captain Taylor laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. After 50 years of treating us like we're too dangerous to live near them, now they want us to save them? The irony isn't lost on me, Kate replied. But we need to think about what this means for humanity. Commander Adams leaned forward. Ma'am, with respect, why should we care? They made it clear they don't want us around. Let them handle their own problems. Alex stood up and activated the wall screen. It showed a map of the galaxy with red dots marking the Devourer attacks. Because if we don't help them, there won't be a galaxy left to ignore us. These things are eating everything in their path. Eventually, they'll reach human space too. Colonel Mitchell studied the map. What makes them think we can do better than their fancy weapons and psychic powers? Kate had been wondering the same thing. According to the intelligence reports, the Devourers avoid human space. They'll attack systems right next to our colonies, but they won't touch human worlds. Maybe they're smart enough to know better, said Taylor with a grin. Or maybe they sense something different about us, Kate said. Something that makes them avoid us. The room fell quiet. Everyone knew what Kate was talking about. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy, and it wasn't pretty. They were known as the species that didn't know when to quit, that fought impossible battles, and somehow won them. Ma'am, said Colonel Mitchell, I've been thinking about our reputation out there. The aliens call us monsters, but they also tell stories about us. Remember the Proxima incident? Kate nodded. One human frigate against an entire pirate fleet. The captain was ordered to retreat, but he refused. He held them off for 6 hours until backup arrived. And the defense of New Montana, added Commander Adams. The colonists had no military training, no proper weapons. But when the Hive Queen invaded, they fought with mining equipment and farm tools. They won. The aliens don't understand us, said Alex. They think we're crazy because we don't run from impossible odds. They think we're monsters because we'd rather die fighting than live on our knees. Kate walked over to the window again. She could see the stars, thousands of them, each one representing solar systems that might be destroyed if the Devourers weren't stopped. The question is, Kate said, do we want to be the monsters they think we are? Or do we want to be the heroes they need us to be? Captain Taylor spoke up. Ma'am, if I may, I've served with humans for 15 years. I've seen them do incredible things when the stakes were high. But I've also seen what happens when they're backed into a corner. These Devourers might be powerful, but they've never faced anything like human stubbornness. You think we can win? Asked Commander Adams. I think we can do something the aliens can't, Taylor replied. We can look at impossible odds and say, so what? We can face certain death and charge forward anyway. That's not being a monster. That's being human. Kate made her decision. Alex, send a message to Earth Command. Tell Admiral Torres we're accepting the mission. But we're not going to Earth first. We're going directly to the front lines. Ma'am? Alex looked surprised. If the galaxy wants to see what humans can do when everything is on the line, then we'll show them. Send a message to the entire fleet. All ships are to prepare for jump to the Nexus system. Colonel Mitchell grinned. The Nexus system? That's right, in the middle of the war zone. Exactly, Kate said. The aliens have spent 50 years being afraid of us. Now they're going to find out if their fears were justified. The meeting broke up, and the officers returned to their ships. Kate stayed in the conference room, looking out at the stars. She thought about the message she had received from Jake Morrison, the human diplomat who had been at the Galactic Council meeting. Jake had described the fear in the aliens' eyes when they talked about asking humans for help. They were more afraid of humans than they were of the Devourers. That should have been funny, but Kate found it sad instead. Admiral, Alex said, returning to the room, the fleet is ready. All ships report green across the board. Kate nodded. Open a channel to the entire fleet. The communication system activated, and Kate's voice was broadcast to every human ship in the area. This is Admiral Sullivan. In 30 minutes, we will jump to the Nexus system to engage an enemy that has defeated every other species in the galaxy. We're going there not because we have to, but because it's the right thing to do. She paused, looking out at the ships that would follow her into battle. For 50 years, the galaxy has called us monsters. They've pushed us to the outer rim and told us we're too dangerous to live among civilized beings. Today, we're going to prove them right. We are dangerous to their enemies, to the forces of darkness, and to anything that threatens innocent life. Today, the galaxy will learn why even the gods fear us. Not because we're evil, but because we're the ones who show up when everyone else runs away. We're the species that looks at impossible odds and says, challenge accepted. The fleet began to move, dozens of human warships turning toward the Nexus system. Kate felt a familiar feeling in her chest, the mixture of fear and excitement that came before a big battle. Take us to war, Alex, she said quietly. Yes, ma'am. Jumping to the Nexus system in 3, 2, 1. The stars stretched into lines of light, and the human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, heading toward a battle that would change the galaxy forever. The Nexus system was in chaos when the human fleet arrived. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the battle unfold on the main screen. Alien ships were everywhere, running from creatures that looked like living shadows made of starlight, and the Void Devourers were enormous. Each one was the size of a small moon, with tentacles that reached out like dark lightning. They moved through space, eating everything they touched, ships, asteroids, even the light from nearby stars. The alien fleet was retreating in panic, their formations breaking apart as they fled. My God, whispered Lieutenant Commander Alex Hayes. They're huge, Kate nodded. She had seen the intelligence reports, but seeing the Devourers in person was different. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time, like angels made of darkness and hunger. Admiral, said the communications officer, we're receiving a message from the Altarian flagship. Commander Zethkara wants to know why we're here. Tell her we're here to help, Kate replied, and ask her to pull her ships back to a safe distance. Ma'am, said Alex, the Altarians are asking if we're going to retreat with them. Kate looked at the screen where the Devourers were slowly moving toward the last planet in the system. On that planet lived 3 billion beings who had nowhere else to go. No, Kate said, we're going to charge. The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at Kate as if she had lost her mind. "Admiral," said Captain Shun from the weapons station, "there are 12 devourers out there. Each one is bigger than our entire fleet. Our weapons might not even scratch them." "Maybe," Kate said, "but we won't know until we try. Alex, send a message to Colonel Mitchell. Tell him to prep the fighters for immediate launch." Colonel Dan Mitchell was already in his fighter. When he received the order, he was the best pilot in the human fleet, and he had been studying the devourers since they arrived. The creatures moved slowly, but their tentacles were fast as lightning. "All fighters, this is Colonel Mitchell," he said over the radio. "We're going to do something that's either very brave or very stupid. We're going to fly straight at those things." "Colonel," said Lieutenant Amy Foster, one of his squadron leaders, "what's the plan?" Mitchell looked at his instruments. "The plan is to be human. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to charge into the dark and see what happens." The fighters launched from the carrier ships like a swarm of angry bees. There were over 200 human pilots, and they all flew directly toward the devourers. The alien fleet watched in horror as the tiny human ships dove into the midst of creatures that could swallow them whole. On the Retribution, Dr. Sam Rodriguez watched the battle from the observation deck. He was a psychologist who studied how different species reacted to fear and stress. What he saw happening made him very excited. "Admiral," he said over the intercom, "I think I know why the devourers avoid human space." Kate's voice came back through the speakers. "I'm listening, Doctor." "The devourers aren't just predators," Sam explained. "They're fear itself. They feed on the terror of their victims. Every species in the galaxy has something they're afraid of: death, pain, the unknown. The devourers can sense that fear and use it to make themselves stronger." "What about humans?" Kate asked. Sam smiled. "Humans are different. We're afraid of things, but we don't let fear control us. We're the species that sees a monster and decides to fight it just to see what happens." On the screen, the human fighters were engaging the devourers in ways that made no sense. Instead of keeping their distance and firing missiles, they were flying close enough to touch the creatures. Some pilots were actually ramming their ships into the tentacles, using their fighters as weapons. "This is insane," said Commander Zefkara. From her ship, "The humans are going to get themselves killed." But something strange was happening. The devourers were reacting to the human attacks differently than they had with the alien ships. Instead of growing stronger, they seemed confused and angry. Lieutenant Amy Foster found herself inside the mouth of the devourer when her fighter was damaged. Instead of panicking, she activated her ship's self-destruct sequence and used her escape pod to get away. The explosion hurt the creature, making it scream in a way that sounded like breaking glass. "Did you see that?" She radioed to the other pilots. "We can hurt them." The battle changed after that. The human fighters started using kamikaze tactics, ramming their ships into the devourers' weak spots. The larger human ships moved in closer, firing their weapons at point-blank range. Captain Jake Morrison, who had been at the original Galactic Council meeting, was aboard the cruiser Defiance when it was swallowed by the largest devourer. Alien observers thought the ship was lost, but Jake had a different idea. "Captain," he said to the ship's commander, "we're inside this thing. Let's see what we can do from in here." The crew of the Defiance began systematically destroying the devourer from within. They used their plasma cutters to burn through its internal structures, their gravity generators to create chaos in its digestive system, and their life support systems to flood it with oxygen, something that hurt the void-based creatures. Doctor Lisa Carter, who was also aboard the Defiance, made another important discovery. "The devourers aren't just afraid of us," she said. "They're confused by us. They can't understand why we're not running away. Maybe because we're too stupid to run. joked one of the engineers. No, Lisa said seriously. It's because we're the one species that looks at certain death and says, challenge accepted. We're chaos agents in a universe that values order. The devourer that had swallowed the Defiance began to thrash around wildly. It was screaming in frequencies that hurt the ears of every alien within light years. But to the humans, it just sounded like a big animal in pain. Keep hitting it, ordered the captain. If it's screaming, that means we're doing something right. On the bridge of the Retribution, Kate watched as the tide of battle began to turn. The human fighters were like mosquitoes attacking elephants, but the elephants were starting to back down. The devourers were retreating, moving away from the human ships. Admiral, said Alex, we're receiving congratulations from the alien fleet. They can't believe what they're seeing. Kate smiled. Tell them this is just the beginning. We're going to chase these things back to whatever dark hole they came from. Dr. Rodriguez was taking notes as fast as he could. This is incredible, he said. The devourers are predators that have never encountered a species that fights back. Out of pure stubbornness. They're literally afraid of us because we're not afraid of them. Are we not afraid? Asked Kate. Oh, we're terrified, Rodriguez replied. But we're doing it anyway. That's what makes us human. The battle continued for 6 hours. By the end, 3 of the devourers were destroyed, and the rest were fleeing to other systems. The human fleet had lost 30 fighters and 2 cruisers. But they had achieved something no other species had managed. They had made the Void Devourers afraid. As the alien fleet regrouped, Kate received messages from commanders across the galaxy. They all wanted to know the same thing. How had humans done what their advanced technology and psychic powers could not? Simple, Kate replied in her broadcast to the Galactic Fleet. We're the species that decided long ago that being afraid doesn't mean you stop moving forward. We're the ones who look at impossible odds and say, so what? We're the monsters you think we are, but we're your monsters now. Colonel Mitchell landed his damaged fighter on the carrier and walked to the debriefing room. He was tired, scared, and exhilarated all at once. How did it feel? Asked one of the younger pilots. Mitchell thought for a moment. Like being human, he said finally. Like looking at something that should have killed us and deciding to kill it first. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy in hours. The species that had spent 50 years calling humans too dangerous to live among were now calling them saviors. But Kate knew the real battle was just beginning. Alex, she said, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're going to need more ships. A lot more ships. Yes, ma'am. What should I tell them about the enemy? Kate looked out at the stars, where the surviving devourers were retreating into the darkness. Tell them we've found something that's more afraid of us than we are of it. And tell them that for the first time in 50 years, the galaxy is glad humans exist. The battle for the Corvin system was different from the first fight. This time, the Void Devourers were ready for humans. They had learned from their defeat at Nexus and had changed their tactics. Instead of moving slowly, they struck fast and hard, trying to overwhelm the human fleet before it could respond. General Chris Walker stood in the command center on the planet's surface, watching the battle in space through the big screens. The Devourers had already landed on 3 continents, and their dark energy was spreading like a plague. Alien civilians were fleeing in panic, but they had nowhere to go. Sir, said Major Tony Clark, the evacuation ships are taking heavy fire. We're losing them faster than we can launch them. Chris nodded grimly. Then we go to Plan B, all ground forces. Prepare for direct assault on the Devourer landing sites. The alien military advisors looked at Chris like he had lost his mind. General, said Colonel Vextar of the Altarian Defense Force, you cannot be serious. Those creatures are the size of buildings. Your soldiers will be killed instantly. Maybe, Chris said. But someone has to try, and we're the only ones crazy enough to do it. The truth was that Chris had been studying the reports from the first battle. The Devourers were powerful, but they had weaknesses. They fed on fear, which meant they were strongest when their enemies were afraid. But humans had something the other species didn't, the ability to be terrified and keep fighting anyway. Sergeant Maya Johnson was leading her squad through the ruins of what used to be a beautiful alien city. The buildings were made of crystal and light, but now they were covered in the dark slime that the Devourers left behind. Her soldiers were scared. She could see it in their eyes, but they kept moving forward. "Sergeant," said Private Bill Roberts, "what's the plan when we find one of these things?" Maya checked her weapon. It was a standard plasma rifle, nothing special. We shoot it until it stops moving. And if that doesn't work, we get creative. Creative how? Maya smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. We're human, Roberts. We'll think of something. The squad rounded a corner and came face to face with a devourer. It was smaller than the ones in space, but it was still huge, about the size of a tank. It had tentacles that moved like snakes and eyes that glowed with hungry light. The creature made a sound like breaking glass mixed with screaming wind. It was trying to project fear directly into their minds, the way it had done with the alien soldiers. But Maya and her squad had been trained for this. "Remember your training," Maya shouted. "Fear is just a feeling. It can't hurt you unless you let it." The squad opened fire, their plasma rifles lighting up the dark street. The Devourer screamed and lashed out with its tentacles, but the humans kept shooting. When Private Roberts ran out of ammunition, he pulled out a grenade and threw it at the creature's face. The explosion hurt the Devourer, but it didn't kill it. Instead, it made it angry. The creature charged at the squad, its tentacles reaching for them like grasping hands. Maya made a decision that would have seemed insane to any other species. She ran straight at the Devourer, dodging its tentacles and jumping onto its back. Then she activated her suit's emergency beacon, a device that would send out a signal powerful enough to be heard across the system. "Maya, what are you doing?" Roberts shouted. "Being human," Maya replied. She pulled out her last grenade and held it tight. "Tell my kids I love them." The explosion killed both Maya and the Devourer, but it also sent a message to every human. In the system, the creatures could be killed, but it would cost everything in space. Admiral Kate Sullivan was dealing with her own problems. The Devourers had surrounded the human fleet, and her ships were taking heavy damage. The cruiser Vigilant had been destroyed, and the destroyer Courage was badly damaged. "Admiral," said Alex, "we're receiving a message from the surface." "General, Walker says his forces are making progress, but they need more time." Kate looked at the tactical display. The Devourers were closing in on her flagship, and she had maybe 10 minutes before they would be in range to destroy the Retribution. "How much time does Walker need?" she asked. "At least 2 hours, ma'am." Kate made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Alex, send a message to the fleet. All ships are to engage the Devourers at close range. We're going to buy Walker the time he needs." "Ma'am, that's suicide. We can't survive 2 hours of close combat with these things." "Maybe not," Kate said, "but we're going to try." The human fleet charged directly at the Devourers, just like they had at Nexus. But this time, the enemy was ready. The creatures had learned to work together, coordinating their attacks to trap human ships and destroy them. Captain Amy Foster was commanding the cruiser, defiant when it was hit by 3 Devourers at once. Her ship was torn apart, but she managed to get most of her crew to the escape pods before the end. "This is Captain Foster," she radioed to the fleet. "The Defiant is lost, but we hurt them bad. Keep fighting." One by one, the human ships were destroyed. The destroyer Brave lasted 30 minutes before it exploded. The cruiser Honor managed to ram a devourer before it died, taking the creature with it. On the planet's surface, the human ground forces were having their own struggles. The devourers were everywhere, and they seemed to be getting stronger. But the humans had something the creatures didn't expect: creativity. Corporal Eddie Martinez was trapped in a building with a squad of alien soldiers when a devourer broke through the wall. The aliens immediately started running, but Eddie had a different idea. "Hey, ugly!" he shouted at the creature. "Over here." The devourer turned toward Eddie, its tentacles reaching for him. But Eddie was ready. He had rigged the building's power core to explode, and he was holding the detonator. "You want to eat fear?" Eddie said. "Try eating this." The explosion brought down the entire building, crushing the devourer underneath. Eddie didn't survive, but he had saved the alien soldiers and shown them something they had never seen before. A human who would die to protect people he had never met. Stories like this were happening all across the planet. Human soldiers were sacrificing themselves to save alien civilians, fighting impossible battles just to buy a few more minutes of time. Dr. Sam Rodriguez was with the medical teams, treating wounded soldiers and civilians. He had been studying the psychological effects of the battle, and what he found was both amazing and terrifying. "The devourers are adapting," he told Kate over the radio. "They're learning to feed on human emotions too. But there's something they can't understand: why we keep fighting even when we know we're going to lose." "Maybe because we're too stupid to quit," Kate replied. Her ship was the last one left, and it was surrounded by devourers. "No," Sam said. "It's because we're the one species that values something more than our own survival. We're willing to die for complete strangers just because it's the right thing to do." The final moments of the battle came when the largest devourer, a creature the size of a small moon, appeared in the system. It headed straight for the planet, intending to consume everything on it. Kate knew there was only one way to stop it. The Retribution had an experimental weapon, a quantum torpedo that could destroy anything, but it had to be detonated from inside the target. "Alex," she said quietly, "evacuate the crew. Take the shuttles and get to the surface. Admiral, what are you planning?" Kate looked out at the stars one last time. "I'm planning to remind the galaxy why even the gods fear us." The Retribution flew directly into the mouth of the giant devourer. Kate steered the ship deep into the creature's body, past its defenses and into its core. Then she activated the quantum torpedo. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The giant devourer was destroyed completely, and the psychic shockwave it created sent the remaining creatures fleeing in terror. But the victory had come at a terrible price. The human fleet was gone, and hundreds of soldiers had died on the planet. The alien observers who had watched the battle were stunned into silence. "Why?" asked Commander Zathkara, her voice shaking. "Why did they do it? Why did they sacrifice themselves for us?" Dr. Lisa Carter, who had survived the battle, on the planet's surface, looked up at the alien commander. Her face was dirty and tired, but her eyes were clear. "Because that's what humans do," Lisa said simply. "We're the species that shows up when everyone else runs away. We're the ones who look at impossible odds and say, someone has to try." Walker, who had lost most of his forces but had saved the planet, received messages from across the galaxy. Every species wanted to know the same thing: how could humans be so brave and so foolish at the same time? "We're not brave," Walker replied in his report to Earth Command. "We're just the species that decided long ago that some things are worth dying for. Today, we prove that the galaxy is one of those things." The aftermath of the battle was broadcast across every world in the galaxy. The other species watched in amazement as human rescue teams worked alongside alien survivors, helping to rebuild what had been destroyed. But what shocked them most was how the humans talked about their fallen comrades. They didn't call them heroes or martyrs. They called them soldiers who had done their job. Admiral Sullivan knew the risks, said Alex Hayes, who had been promoted to captain after the battle. She made the choice that had to be made. That's what humans do. We make the hard choices so others don't have tea. 6 months after the battle for Corvin's system, Captain Eddie Morgan stood on the bridge of the Endurance, the last surviving ship of the original human fleet. The ship was scarred and patched, but it was still flying. Eddie had been promoted after Admiral Sullivan's sacrifice, and now he was the ranking human officer in galactic space. The Endurance was approaching a new space station called Unity Point. It was being built by all the species of the galaxy working together, something that had never happened before. The station was a symbol of the new alliance that had formed after the humans had proven themselves in battle. "Captain," said Lieutenant Sarah Kim, "we're receiving a welcome message from the station. They're asking us to dock at the primary bay." Eddie nodded. "Take us in, Lieutenant. Let's see what the galaxy has built." The docking bay was huge, big enough to hold ships from dozens of different species. Eddie could see Altarian cruisers next to ethereal ghost ships, Nexus Federation destroyers, alongside vessels he didn't recognize. All of them were working together, united by their shared experience of watching humans die to protect them. Captain Jake Morrison was waiting for Eddie at the airlock. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But he was smiling. "Eddie," Jake said, shaking his hand. "Good to see you made it." "Good to be here," Eddie replied. "Though I have to say, this is not what I expected when I joined the military." Jake laughed. "None of us expected this. Come on, I'll show you around." Unity Point was like nothing Eddie had ever seen. The corridors were filled with beings from every corner of the galaxy, all working together on projects that would have been impossible just months before. Human engineers were teaching alien technicians how to build weapons that could hurt the Devourers. Alien scientists were sharing their knowledge of space travel with human pilots. "The change has been incredible," Jake explained as they walked. After Corvin's system, the entire galaxy shifted. The species that used to be afraid of humans are now asking us to teach their children. They entered a large conference room where the new Galactic Council was meeting. It was different from the old council. Humans had been given seats at the table, and their voices were heard as equals. Dr. Helen Clark, who had survived the battles and was now the senior human scientist, was presenting her research to the council. She had been studying the Devourers for months, trying to understand what made them so afraid of humans. "The Devourers are fear incarnate," Helen explained to the mixed audience of aliens and humans. "They feed on terror, grow stronger from panic, and use despair as a weapon. Every species in the galaxy has something they fear more than death: pain, loneliness, the unknown." Elder Mordoon, the ancient ethereal leader, leaned forward. "But humans are different?" Helen nodded. "Humans are full of fear, just like everyone else. We're afraid of death, afraid of pain, afraid of failure. But we learned something that the other species didn't. Being afraid doesn't mean you have to stop. Can you explain that?" Asked Commander ZE2H single quotes. Kara got Helen thought for a moment. "Humans are the species that looks at a monster and says, 'I'm terrified of you, but I'm going to fight you anyway.' We're not fearless, we're full of fear. But we do what needs to be done despite our fear." The room fell silent. The alien representatives were trying to understand this concept, but it was difficult for them. Most species either ran from danger or were too proud to admit they were afraid. Captain Eddie Morgan spoke up. "It's like this. Every human soldier who charged the Devourers was scared. They knew they might die, but they also knew that if they didn't fight, innocent people would suffer. So they chose to be brave, even while they were terrified. That is why the Devourers fear you, said Elder Morden. You are chaos in their ordered universe of terror. They cannot understand a species that acknowledges fear or refuses to be controlled by it. The meeting continued for hours, but Eddie found his mind wandering. He was thinking about all the humans who had died in the war. Admiral Sullivan, Sergeant Johnson, Corporal Martinez, and hundreds of others. They had died so that the galaxy could live, and now the galaxy was finally understanding what humanity truly was. After the meeting, Eddie walked to the station's observation deck. The view was incredible. He could see ships from every species in the galaxy, all working together to build something new. But he could also see the memorial gardens that had been built to honor the human dead. Dr. Sam Rodriguez joined him at the window. The psychologist had been studying the changes in galactic society since the war began. Fascinating, isn't it? Sam said. 6 months ago, these species couldn't agree on anything. Now they're working together like they've done it for centuries. What? Changed? Eddie asked. They saw what humans were willing to do for strangers, Sam replied. They realized that we're not monsters who enjoy killing. We're the species that becomes monsters to protect others. That's a very different thing. Eddie nodded. But at what cost? We've lost so many good people. That's the burden of strength, Sam said. With great power comes great responsibility. Humans have the power to stand up to things that other species cannot face. That means we have the responsibility to use that power wisely. A few days later, Eddie received a message that changed everything. It was from Earth Command, and it contained orders that would reshape the galaxy. Earth has decided to form the Galactic Defense Force. Eddie read to his senior staff. It will be a joint military organization with humans training soldiers from every species. The goal is to make sure that no species ever has to face the darkness alone again. Lieutenant Kim looked up from her console. Sir, we're receiving volunteer applications from across the galaxy. Thousands of young aliens want to train with human instructors. Eddie smiled. I guess they want to learn how to be brave. No, said Dr. Rodriguez, who was listening from the communication station. They want to learn how to be human. Not biologically, but philosophically. They want to learn how to face their fears and do what's right anyway. The first class of mixed-species soldiers graduated from the new training program 6 months later. Eddie was there to watch as humans, Altarians, Ethereals, and dozens of other species stood together in formation. They had learned to fight as one unit, each species contributing their unique strengths. But more importantly, they had learned the human philosophy that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action despite fear. They had learned that sometimes you have to become the monster to protect the innocent. The ceremony was held on the anniversary of the Battle of Corvin System. As the new soldiers took their oath, Eddie thought about Admiral Sullivan and all the others who had died to make this moment possible. Today, we established the Galactic Defense Force, announced Fleet Admiral Ryan Torres, who had come from Earth, for the ceremony. We do this not because we want to fight, but because we have learned that there are things worth fighting for. The crowd erupted in cheers that could be heard in dozens of languages. But Eddie noticed something else in the front row. A group of human children were sitting with alien youngsters, all of them watching the ceremony with wide eyes. Those children would grow up in a galaxy where humans were not feared as monsters, but respected as guardians. They would know that their parents and grandparents had died to protect beings they had never met. Simply because it was the right thing to do. After the ceremony, Eddie walked through the new training facility. He saw human instructors teaching alien cadets how to overcome their fear, how to charge into impossible odds, how to make the hard choices that leadership required. But he also saw alien instructors teaching human cadets about their own unique abilities telepathy advanced technology, and wisdom from cultures that were millions of years old. "It's a partnership," said Jake Morrison, who had been appointed as the first human ambassador to the Galactic Council. "We're not just the galaxy's attack dogs anymore. We're part of the family." Eddie nodded. "A family that fights together." "A family that protects each other," Jake corrected. "The Devourers are still out there, and there are other threats we haven't even imagined yet. But now we'll face them together." As Eddie looked out at the stars, he thought about the title that the galaxy had given humanity, the species that even the gods fear. It wasn't because humans were evil or cruel. It was because they were the ones willing to stare into the abyss and dive in headfirst if it meant protecting others. The galaxy had learned that humans weren't monsters. They were the species that became monsters so that others could remain innocent. They were the guardians who stood watch in the darkness, ready to face whatever came next. And in the end, that's what made them the most human thing of all. The willingness to sacrifice everything for people they had never met. Simply because it was the right thing to do. The war with the Devourers was over, but the watch would never end. And humanity would be there, standing guard, ready to face whatever came out of the darkness. Because that's what humans do. They show up when everyone else runs away. They stand up to the monsters, even when they're terrified. They make the hard choices so others don't have to. They are the species that even the gods learned to fear. And the galaxy was finally glad they existed.